Good evening. We'll call the May 21 meeting over of the Reno County Planning Commission. Welcome to all of you. This is kind of we're at unique times, unique challenging times, and we appreciate your patience with us. We've had a small pause in our meeting schedule, and we're practicing our social distancing like we should, and hopefully we can start our regular monthly meetings now. We have a couple cases to see today and another discussion item, so we'll go ahead and get started. The gate you have in your packet, the meeting from February and March meetings. Excuse me, March meetings. We'll have to get the dates, nonetheless.
Mr. Chair, can we officially call roll?
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. I was just jumping right in there. Staff, would you please call the roll?
Seltzer. Here. Macklin. Buchanan. Baker.
Here.
Jorns.
Here.
French.
Here.
And Gertson.
Here.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Out of practice. It's quite evident, right? I will if you review the minutes in our packet, I've review a motion. So moved. It's been moved. There's a second.
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, vote to approve the minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. To protect the rights of all parties involved and to give an opportunity for everyone to speak, the Reno County Planning Commission follows a specific procedure outlined in the handouts in your chairs. During the hearing, there will be an opportunity for comments from the applicant, the planning and zoning staff, and members of the audience. Members of the Planning Commission may ask questions or request additional information at any time. If the Planning Commission makes a recommendation after tonight's public hearing, the case will be presented to the County Commission's office in approximately 2 weeks. Mark staff will notify the applicant of the date, and anyone else interested can contact Mark or the County Commission for the exact date.
Right now, it's tentatively June 9th, which would be a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. At the County Commissioner's chambers in the courthouse.
Great. Regardless of whether or not the Planning Commission approves or disapproves the proposed conditional use permit, it's possible to file a protest regarding the decision. Please contact Mark for the process, and that must be used to file such protest. I'll formally open the hearing regarding case number 2020-02. The Rita Quillin applicant seeking a homestead agricultural lot split. Have any of the Planning Commission members had any outside contact regarding this case? No. Do any of the Planning Commission members have a conflict of interest in this case?
Yes.
None. Okay. Would the applicant please step forward, state your name and address for the record? You have 10 minutes to present your case.
Yes, my name is Rita Quillin. My address is 10208 North Wilson Road, Hutchinson, Kansas.
Turn to the podium there, and
Okay.
there might be a microphone there, and I'm deaf.
No.
There's not,
No microphone.
well, I'm still deaf, so speak up, please.
Okay, I took my mask off.
Thank you.
That helps a lot. We're requesting actually a homestead split, lot split. Correct, Pat?
Correct.
Yeah. Not an agricultural. What we have is 80 acres. It's in the middle of the section with a 20-foot driveway. And Mr. and Mrs. Wilson have requested to go ahead and purchase the property, and I will stay on the property in 7 acres. It's outlined in the, yeah. It's outlined in this. What we have is we did some creative thinking, at least on my part, because I wasn't sure exactly how the planning commissioner, or whatever he is, understood exactly what we were after. So what we're looking at is 7 acres that's over here on this side. Okay? Mr. and Mrs. Wilson are going to build a house next to that property, that's 7 acres, which is where the barn is and some other outhouses are. But they're not going to interfere in the 7 acres. They're going to be right next to it. And I would like to address Mr. McClure's letter, because it became apparent that he was given the wrong information. In his letter, he was told that they were going to build back here in the back. And that's not it at all. It never was. And I don't know why he was told that, except we've tried to get through to Mark what we're doing. He's not requested any evidence, and he dismissed the fact that we offered any evidence. There's been no site visit, so he doesn't know. And he certainly upset Mr. McClure. The boundaries of the property are going to stay the same. We're not interfering with any other properties at all. This is going to be strictly on the 80 acres that I own. And Mr. and Mrs. Wilson have declared that they will buy that property. The 7 acres will go into a TOD for them. So they'll have the whole 80. The driveway that's on here will be the same driveway that I'm using. So there's no change there. We believe that we have met all of the conditions that meet the variance, so that we can go ahead and do this. One of the things that I did in my career was law enforcement. And I've protected this community along with other counties. And I want to be very careful about who I place there, because it is so isolated. You could end up with someone that likes to build meth, and nobody would do it. They couldn't smell it. Their houses are a ways away. It's like Mr. McClure's. He can't see my house from his property. He won't be able to see the Wilson house from his property. And so I see no problem with going this route. Pat is familiar with all of the neighbors. They know him. He knows them. So it's not like I'm going to have someone unfamiliar come in. This is strictly to protect the community. Do you have any questions on me? Did I make myself clear?
So I think the primary concern with this has to do with just the fact that you just got a 20-foot
understand.
And for safety purposes, have you looked at the opportunity, is there any opportunity for you to purchase additional land that would give you more road frontage?
No. No. We had a fire out there several years ago. We had fire trucks up at the house. It was not on my place, but it was on the neighbors. And it was kind of, they didn't have any problems.
You don't have any other access road besides the one entrance?
That's all.
That is usually a concern to emergency personnel.
I understand that, but, you know, the way we've got it set up, we're all drive-through in both places we drive-through. So, it's never been a problem. And I'm retired, and I don't go in places unless I need livestock to grain. So, you know, that's not gonna be a problem either.
And I have some stuff I can address on that issue.
I will turn it over to you, Pat.
I'm not any good at public speaking, so I pretty much just wrote out everything. I got some slides to show. I'll introduce myself. I'm Patrick Wilson. I lived Reno County the majority of my life. There was a short time I was a sheriff's deputy in Mitchell County, which is about north of here. I'm here as a representative for Rita and myself about this property. As she explained, it's 80 acres with a 20-foot wide driveway. That's kind of in the middle. I've known Rita for about 20 years now. She gave me the opportunity to hunt that property, because back in the day there was a lot of turkeys, and it still is. It's not quite as many as it used to be. She's become part of my family, and I've become part of her family. In September of 2019, she offered the opportunity for us to buy the property and build on it. And her wishes were to stay on the property and in her home and continue to do her farm. That's what she enjoys, and that's how she wants to leave it. I would move out there, help take over some of the operation, and assist her when needed. When the time comes that Rita's ready and willing, I would take possession of the rest of the property and deconstruct the house, leaving only one house on the property as it was. My intentions are to restore it, to make it nicer, safer, and as natural as it can be. I have no desire or intentions of building more houses, splitting the property off any more than what it is. In the regulations, it only allows you to split it once, and that's all I want. Originally, we got this notice for the meeting on March 14th, because we were planning on March 14th, but the Rona kind of got in the way. That is Wilson Road, and that is the entrance to the driveway. In the meeting notice, under the staff analysis on the paragraph, no, he doesn't go backwards. It's missing some slides. Did you open the right one?
I don't know, I assumed it was, you have a different one on there?
Well, I thought there was only one.
There was two of them were on there. That's not the right one?
Well, it's missing some slides.
It's not. I thought that's the only one. I don't have the flash drive. Yeah, that's the one that I opened. Oh, okay.
Anyway, that's okay. Like I said, 20-foot wide driveway, it's asphalted. In the meeting notice under the staff analysis on the second paragraph, it states, in reviewing the definition and information submitted for the petition, staff had not received any evidence that the land is currently used for production of plants, animals, or horticultural products, and that was discussed with the applicant providing the information, supporting the granting of the lot split. I don't remember having the conversation with Mr. McComb, but I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying I don't remember it. I know we've talked multiple times, many a times, and he asked when the last time cows were on it, and it's been 6 or 8 years ago. But there's always been sheep on it. They've been on there forever. And as of May of this year, it's got cattle back on it too. Which there was pictures of those. But it's got a well and cows. It's also got plums and blackberries and walnut trees and all kinds of things, which definitely is evidence of agricultural use according to the definition. However, in the third paragraph of the staff analysis, it states the homestead lot split does not designate the land must currently be used for said purposes. So it's kind of my understanding that I didn't need to provide evidence. There wasn't a requirement, but it's evidence. It's obviously an agricultural use. It's zoned for agricultural use. It's taxed as agricultural. In Article 3-104 in the Homestead Agricultural Lot Split Regulation, it states, the intent of this provision is to accommodate those divisions of agricultural lands for the creation of a non-compliant lot surrounding an existing homestead area that does not have direct frontage on an existing public road, and which only can be accessible by reason of access easement. I never have read anything saying a homestead lot split requires currently being used for agricultural purposes, even though it obviously is. I'm really lost about the missing slides. Also in the commission meeting notice was a letter written by Mr. McClure. I don't know if he's here today or not. And in that letter, he had some concerns and issues about the lot split. And I'd like to take some time to address those concerns and any concerns the staff or you, the panel might have. According to Article 1-102 of the Reno County zoning regulations, purpose number 1 is to promote the health, safety, comfort, and general welfare of the citizens of Reno County. So that's kind of what I want to clear up. Here's my background. I'm currently a certified law enforcement officer for the state of Kansas. I've worked as a sheriff deputy in Mitchell County, Kansas. I have worked as part of the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. I've worked for Missouri Department of Conservation, and I've worked for Colorado State Parks. Combined, I got roughly 10 to 12 years experience in law enforcement. In that time, I've been a member of a tactical team. I've taught school shooter response training, and I've taught firearms education. I responded to numerous emergency situations in places even more remote than this. Mitchell County, there's not a whole lot up there. And there's roads that don't exist on maps, and if the conditions are not exactly perfect, you're not going down them. You get real lost, really. It's a different kind of criminal element out there. There are a lot of outlaws, and because there's not a lot of people. I could manage that county by myself, for the first 2 years of my career at night with no help. I've worked in wildlife and parks as a field technician. I've worked in Colorado State Parks and Missouri State Parks. I grew up on a farm in a farming family. I know how to take care of the property. I know how to take care of the land. Once established, my plan is to integrate a cattle grazing program and remove invasive species such as eastern red cedars. This will not only promote more wildlife habitat, but also decrease the probability of wildfires. I've already started to clear brush and limbs and trees from the fence lines in the property, especially Mr. McClure's property. I made sure that was even better than the rest of it, just because of his concerns. My wife, she is a registered nurse. She has over 15 years in the medical field. 5 of those years as an emergency room nurse. Other people in the area, such as the Phillips family, which own the majority of the property around this property, I've known them my whole life. I went to school with their kids, and they've known me since I was little. They are comfortable and accepting to having us nearby. They both know what me and my wife do, and that our lives are dedicated to being first responders. We're not people who are going to move into an area and trash it. I'm there to promote good and safe land practices that will decrease the environmental dangers and increase the conservation of the habitat. As Rita said earlier, I think Mr. McClure was under the impression the house was going to go clear on the east end and somewhere in there, and that's not the case. It's going to be closer to the existing driveway and the already existing house. Easily accessible by any kind of emergency vehicle. The driveway is 20 feet wide with no overhanging branches or trees, and it's asphalt. That's more than enough to fit any modern emergency vehicle. Like I've said, I've lived in this county the majority of my life, and I'm familiar with a lot of back roads, because that's what you do in high school, you drive back roads, explore. North Wilson Road is one of the better maintained dirt roads in Reno County. If there was an emergency, the responders going to come from Plum Street or Nickerson. And that's asphalt the entire way, except for a mile and a quarter to get to the driveway. As 10 years as a first responder experience, I have no issues and see no issues with access to the existing dwelling or a new one. On March 16th of 2020, I spoke with Todd Strain of Reno County Emergency Management. Mr. Strain looked at a map of the property and where it was located in the county. He said he's very familiar with the area. We had a conversation. Mr. Strain told me the average size of a modern-day fire engine or emergency vehicle is 8 to 9 feet. I asked Mr. Strain if a 20-foot wide asphalted driveway, such as the one I showed him, would be an obstacle in responding to an emergency at that location. Mr. Strain said absolutely not. In fact, he wished all driveways could be as good as that in that area. He said they could easily fit a fire truck or a tanker truck down that kind of driveway. I asked Mr. Strain if the addition of a second dwelling on the property would have any negative effects in the emergency response situation. He told me that it would not make any difference. With a good access point like what is there, there would be no difference in responding to a second house. I asked Mr. Strain about the conditions of Wilson Road in the particular area, and he said he knows the road and that is well maintained, and he has never had any issues with being able to access it or even in inclement weather. I described to Mr. Strain my plans as far as removing the cedars and brush and implementing rotational grazing on the land, and he agreed doing those kind of practices would reduce the risk of wildfires. This in turn brings me to the last question I had for Mr. Strain. If in case there ever was a fire on this section of land, would the driveway to the property be a deterrent? And he told me it would not. All actuality, the driveway would be an attribute because it would give him and first responders a good stable access point to reach the middle of the section. So in conclusion, any concerns that the law split would turn the property into subdivision or residential area are not needed. I just want to make it better. I want a house and a farm to raise my family similar to how I was raised, with a love of animals, nature, and hard work. The property is currently and always been used for agricultural purposes. The addition of a new dwelling is not going to change that. The construction of a new dwelling and deconstruction of the old one is a positive thing, increasing the value of the property and the surroundings. It's increasing the property value and also gives additional revenue to the county on a piece of land that could possibly go to waste. I have studied and implemented good land stewardship, proven to be brush and invasive species, implementing grazing practices to reduce the risk of fire danger or natural disaster. My wife and I are both first responders with a long resume of experience and knowledge, and we're always willing to help people in need. We will be an asset to the area, which in turn promotes health, safety, comfort, and the general welfare of the citizens. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I have one question, sir. I understand that you would purchase the entire 80 acres with the 7 acres that Mr. Quillin owns or lives on being a title to transfer on death. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So you would basically have a title to the full 80 acres.
Yes.
And then time she decides to vacate that residence, my understanding, you would be tearing down that second residence.
Yep.
You wind up with a single residence there.
Yes, sir.
You plan on having two residents in the same, basically, same area, is that correct? I think they're both listed as the same address, 10208, is that right, Mark? I think you plan to construct a 10208.
Yeah.
And her address already is 10208, so it's basically going to be when it's in the same parameters.
Mr. Jardy, there'll be a different address assigned to Mr. Wilson's house, if this is approved, yes.
Thank you.
Staff?
You want to stay up there?
No, you see that. Hey, Mark Von Atch and County Planner, good evening, board here. This is a request for a homestead agricultural lot split. That section is actually found in our subdivision regulations, so it's not in their zoning regulations, but in the subdivision. I'd like to point out that this staff report, was prepared prior to this public hearing, and so there was a lot of information that was presented tonight. The existing house is going to be torn down, the location of animals that I did not have in evidence in my staff report or in your packet as well. And so that's one of the purposes of a public hearing, is to gather evidence at a meeting and understand what the true intent of the request is. But again, this is located at 1028 North Wilson Road, and for those of you who don't know, you're in the way northern part of the county here. Wilson Road is on your left right here, and then the county line, or 108th, is up there. This is actually Rice County. On this side of Wilson Road, on the west side, this area that's just the regular aerophoto color, that is the area that's currently unzoned. Down here is 95th Avenue. Parcel is actually zoned agricultural, and as is mentioned several times, there is a 20-foot driveway that leads back to this 80 acres of land. To place a second house on the parcel requires the new house to be in compliance with the zoning and the subdivision regulations. The biggest concern with placing the second house is the fact that it lacks any type of road frontage. As I stated, this parcel only has 20 feet of road frontage, so it's almost virtually impossible, unfortunately, to think of an 80-acre parcel with the inability to get a second residence on there. Normally, you'd be dealing with this agricultural lot split or just splitting the 80 acres into 240s and being able to place a second house on the property. In conversations with Mr. Wilson, I provided him in my staff report five options. The first one was he could construct what we call a guest house, and that small guest house and what is required of a guest house is listed in the staff report. And I recognize a lot of these options may not be the greatest in the world and may not be what their overall intent was. But my purpose in giving him these options was to provide some other means to ultimately accomplish what they want to do with that property without having to go through a formal public hearing process. A guest house would be a simple zoning permit by my office. We would have the sanitation of things reviewed by the health department, and then he'd be able to live in that guest house until such time as, say, the main house is vacated by Ms. Quillin, excuse me. The second one would be to apply for a special exception through the Board of Zoning Appeals to place a manufactured home on the property. For those of you that are on the board a while, you may remember a case where we had where a gentleman wanted to place a manufactured home on it and bring his elderly parents onto the property to care for them. That is simply a special exception. The board reviews that. We review it for health department concerns. And then they are allowed to have that manufactured home on the property for a period of up to 3 years. And then at what that time happens, the mobile home is either removed from the property or they come back to this board and then we renew that special exception. And so that was another option that I had presented to them. That is a simple hearing through the Board of Zoning Appeals. Like I said, we don't have a lot of history with that type of a request. We did do one, and that was unanimously approved by the board. And I would see no reason why staff or this board would probably object to a request like that. But it does take a formal public hearing. The third one would be purchase enough land in order to do what we call the agricultural lot split. Now, I realize that you would have to purchase probably the additional land up in here. By doing something like that, and then you'd be building, say, between lots 5 and 6 right there on the map, you could do what we call an agricultural lot split. Hire a surveyor, you go out there, you split between 3 and 7 acres of land off, and it's something that's done administratively. It's not done through a public hearing process. The one thing I would clarify with that type of request, though, is they would not be able to build back where they're proposing to build right now because of the fact that when you do an agricultural lot split, it can only be between 3 and 7 acres of land, and also you have to meet what we call a lot width to depth ratio. And so by the time you would split off enough land to get back where they are proposing to build, you'd be over the 7 acre maximum that you can have. So it probably would not be an ideal situation, but there would be no reason why you would not be able to do a 3 to 7 acre split up here. You could build closer to Wilson Road. Again, maybe not the most ideal situation and not maybe what they were hoping for, but it would be something that they could do and get that accomplished. Lastly, the other option that I gave here, initially was, and it's a big stretch, and I realize that, is to rezone a portion of that property to residential zoning district. That would allow you to have any type of parcel between 3 and say 39 acres of land. And I'll admit again that that's something that is probably not what they had intended for that part of the land. It is a lot of work because there are road issues here. We would have to have land probably from parcels number 6 and 7 there because it's only a 20-foot wide strip of ground right there. And then they would have to build a public road that leads back here. And then also they would have to construct 8 additional lots out in that area. And I realize that is probably not the intent of their overall goal for the property. And I understand that, but it is another option that I presented to them. And I apologize, it wasn't the last one, but the other option, you can come over on this west side of the ground, and build a house out there because that area is unzoned. No approval process needed by me whatsoever. You just go, you split off whatever you would like, and then you can build a house over on this side of the road without going through any kind of formal public hearing process. So, those were the options I initially presented to the owner and the applicant, and like I said in the staff report, everything was rejected by that. The last option that I presented to them was the homestead lot split option here. And I informed them at the time that I had some reservations with doing a homestead lot split just because of the fact that I did not know the activities that were going on this parcel of ground, whether it was being currently used for agricultural purposes. The intent really of the homestead lot split, I believe, if you think about it, is for a farmer to be able to split off a house that's sitting out in the middle of their acreage. You know, if you have a 40-acre, 80-acre, 160-acre, maybe back in the 1800s, you know, you built the original farmstead and you built it in the middle of the farm ground so you can overlook your crop, for example. In order to meet that type of regulations that we have in place right now, virtually impossible. They can't meet the 3 to 7 acre minimum. They can't meet the lot width to depth ratio. So this type of application was put in place specifically for those types of situations where a farmer would like to split off their original farmhouse and keep the farm ground as their source of income in their later years here. And so that was really, I believe, the intent of this regulation in here is to allow that farmer to be able to sell that house off with minimal amount of acreage around it by just providing that easement to the road so the person that buys that house has a way to get in and out of that property legally. Any questions so far?
One question right now, I mean, would you just clarify for me now, the section of ground, you have maybe 10, is that the 80 acres?
This is currently the 80 acres, yes, that Ms. Quillin owns right now. Now, what you see in your survey that I'll show you is only going to be the front 40 acres.
Yeah,
We did not require them to survey the back 40 acres. Yeah, so. Yeah, so you may see references like in that survey or so of a 40-acre parcel of ground. It's not really, it's 80. Yeah, but we did not ask them and require them to survey the other 40 acres because it really wasn't part of this process. You know, that's just it's unnecessary. It's more money to the cost of the survey.
Could you clarify the difference between the homestead and the ag lot split? There's two different ones.
There's two different ones. They're two different processes. The agricultural lot split is very similar to the homestead lot split. The major difference between the two is the homestead lot split is not something that I can approve of administratively. It takes this board to make a recommendation. It takes the Board of County Commissioners to grant approval of something like that. An agricultural lot split is something that I can do administratively, and believe me, I've done 20, 30 of these. They're very popular with a farmer that wants to split off 3 to 5 acres of ground for a son or daughter to come back and live on the farm. They're virtually the same end result, but the big difference between the two is the fact that when you are applying for a homestead lot split, you cannot meet the definition of an agricultural lot split because you can't meet the 3 to 7 acre minimum. You can't meet the 3 to 1 lot width to depth ratio. Those are the two big things. Mainly because you do not have road frontage where the house is sitting. You know, you look at all these houses. You can picture, like, say, this house right here, for example. You know, this could have been at one time considered an agricultural lot split. You know, maybe this house originally owned all of his farm ground in here, and the farmer wanted to sell off the house and move somewhere else, but yet retain the farm ground. So the farmer would hire a surveyor, survey off 3 to 7 acres, has proper road frontage, meets the 3 to 1 lot width to depth ratio, and then you would survey that. It would get reviewed by me and the health department for compliance, and then they record that as a new parcel, with a new deed, and then they can sell this house without having to encompass a lot of other farm ground, you know, around it. Our old regulations, if you recall, in the agricultural district required 10 acres. We heard a lot of complaints when we were developing the regulations that Farmers did not want to have to split off 10 acres. They just wanted to do something smaller so they didn't have to lose all this farm ground around here and essentially losing income. So we developed the agricultural lot split. Homestead lot splits would be, say, for example, if this house was sitting way out here, for example. Well, there's no way that you're going to be able to meet the lot width to depth ratio of 3 to 1. But the biggest kicker, the fact is that we have a 3 to 7 acre minimum. Now, they can certainly split off 40 around that house and there wouldn't be a problem so long as they can meet those ratios. But when you have a house that's sitting out in the middle and they just want to split off 3 to 7 acres around it, it's impossible to meet our regulations. So the homestead lot split process was developed to try and address situations such as that. Okay? Obviously, this is a picture of the surrounding area here. The parcel you're looking at is right here, and here is the 20-foot driveway that leads back to her house, and her house is sitting right here. The new house would be sitting somewhere in this location over here. Here's a blow-up of the parcel, just to give you an idea of this 20-foot strip of ground, and you saw it was constructed of asphalt millings, and I have it actually pretty much virtually the same picture of the property. It's very unique property in the sense that it's an 80-acre parcel of ground with no road frontage. It's considered legal non-conforming in our regulations, but for the fact that it was created prior to us requiring probably any type of road frontage. We did not require any road frontage for a parcel until actually 1994. And so my guess is that this parcel was created way before that. So it's legal. What they did at that time, it's just that when you want to further do something with that property, you have to come into compliance with our zoning regulations. And that is the lot width to depth ratio, the 3 to 7 acres, or the minimum frontage requirements that we have right now. That was very important in our subdivision regulations under 1102 to read the paragraph here. I think I talked a while about it, but I just wanted to make note, for the record that to read the purpose of the subdivision regulations, which is on page 3 of the report there, where it talks about the division and improvement of land for non-ag development has a significant and lasting impact upon the physical environment of Reno County, Kansas, and so on and so forth. Under the homestead agricultural lot splits in our subdivision regulations, it provides you what the definition of that is, and it also talks in there about the property must be zoned and used as agricultural. So if you look at that, you may wonder, well, what is zoned and used as agricultural means? And so you have to then turn to the definition section of our zoning regulations, where it talks about the definition of what is zoned and used as agricultural. Before I get to that, though, the following pages in my report really just kind of give you the background of what a homestead lot split is, some of the criteria that staff would look at when approving something. It also kind of gives you some of the approval guidelines, and then to kind of answer your question, Lisa, it kind of gives you what an agricultural lot split is. So under the definition section, it talks about agricultural purposes, land used for. The use of attractive land for the production of plants, animals, or horticultural products, including but not limited to forages, grains, and feed crops, dairy animals and dairy products, beef cattle, sheep, swine, and horses, bees and apiary products, trees and forest products, fruits, nuts, berries, vegetables, or nursery, floral, ornamental, or greenhouse products. So that is what land used for agricultural purposes means. I think it's very important, though, to also go on in that section of the definitions and learn what land used for agricultural purposes is not. And there's several of them that are listed in our definition. I'll read the first two. Land used for agricultural purposes shall not include the following: lands which are used for recreational purposes, even though such properties may produce or maintain some of the plants and animals listed here. And so, in other words, you can't have your land and have it open up for recreational purposes, whether it be hiking trail, biking trail, hunting, that type of stuff. That is not considered agricultural under our definitions, okay? And the second one, lands which are used for rural residential or suburban residential home sites and yard plots whose primary function is for residential purposes, even though such properties may produce or maintain some of the plants or animals listed herein. So, again, what that really, in my interpretation of the regulations, is saying is that you may own 40 acres, you may own 80 acres of land, you may own a section of ground, and you may have on there horses, you may have on there cattle or sheep or what have you, but if you're not actively selling those and gaining income from those types of animals and stuff, then you are not using that land for agricultural purposes. I can buy 40 acres out there, and believe me, I know really nothing about raising of animals, but I can certainly have like a goat or two. But that doesn't mean that I'm agricultural and therefore I'm exempt from all of the zoning regulations. I can build whatever I want on the property. So I think, the definition of that plus the fact of reading what agricultural land used for is not is very important when reviewing this case. Look. This is the site plan that you have in your packet. Again, the proposal is to take the existing house and the existing barns and everything and split off a 7-acre tract of land. So that's going to be right here. And then the access easement, because once you split the land off, now this house is going to lose its public access route. So you have to be able to provide a way for this person, whether it be, Ms. Quillin or somebody else, to be able to get access to Wilson Road, which is way down here. So the survey that is in your packet here includes this area of ground, which is south of the parcel. This will be considered the egress easement. So, if Mr. Wilson ends up buying the whole property or even just the 40, what have you, whoever is living in the existing house will have the legal right to cross Mr. Wilson's property and be able to go out the 20-foot driveway to the public road. That's very important when you're doing a homestead lot split, because when you split that ground, the person that is going to be buying the house that's existing out there will have no more road frontage, and so they have no technically legal way to be able to access the public road, and they're essentially landlocked without this egress easement. Article 13 I included the chart in there, which is our zoning district requirements here. The parcel 1, which is the actual homestead lot split, is required to meet our R1 zoning district requirements, which is 165 feet of width, 330 feet of depth, and a minimum of 3 acres. This parcel actually does comply then with those regulations and those requirements that are found in Article 13. So, under the staff analysis, in order to qualify for a homestead lot split, the parcel needs to be zoned and used for agricultural purposes as defined, I believe, in this report. As I had stated previously, no evidence was submitted to support granting of the homestead lots, but I had requested some evidence showing, hey, what is going on the property now? Is it just a house out there with a bunch of land, or are there other farm animals or other things going out there? Now tonight you saw evidence of that, but I did not have that evidence when I was preparing my report. Okay. Now I'd like to also point out to the board, and it was also mentioned by the applicant, that the regulations do not say that the land must currently be used for agricultural purposes, and so I thought it was fair to bring that up. It says the land should be used for agricultural purposes, but it doesn't say that it must currently be. So, if there was evidence many, many years ago that this area was used for cattle, for sheep, the board could interpret the regulations, and that's really your guys' job, is to how should these regulations be interpreted. You can say, well, if there was cattle, if there were sheep out there at one time, then we could say that that land was used for agricultural purposes, whether it is today or not. So I just wanted to point that out to the board. Under my analysis, I believe the intent of the the regulations is to have the land currently be used for agricultural purposes according to the definitions in there. So based on that recommendation, and also under the purposes of the zoning regulations found under Article 1-102, staff is recommending denial of the request. Again, I would like to point out that this is just a recommendation, and your recommendation, will go forward to the Board of County Commissioners, and they will make the final determination in that. In my staff report, again, I provided you a suggested motion based on my recommendation. I also provided the board an alternative motion should this board decide that the evidence you saw presented here tonight warrants granting of the homestead lot split. So, last slide I have, I believe, is one you've probably already seen, but this is my picture of her driveway entrance. So you can see here, this is an existing house. It's right here. This is their driveway, and this is Ms. Quillen's driveway. It is constructed of asphalt millings, as they indicated right there. I didn't go on the property. I didn't go up to the house to see what the driveway looks like further on down, closer to her house, but I believe they had some other pictures kind of showing it. So, with that kind of concludes my report. So if you have other questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mark, with the new information that we've gotten, that they have basically the evidence of agriculture, does that change in any way the way you would look at it? And maybe, I'm just asking, just to see if it's a new evidence that makes a difference in how we do it.
I think the slides that were presented, they certainly help, I think, in the situation. But I think still, again, like I previously said in the staff report, just because you have cows on your property, just because you have sheep or goats, doesn't mean that you are in the agricultural business and deriving income from those. Now, I could be wrong, I don't know, but from the evidence presented to me tonight or in the application, I didn't have it, so I didn't have really anything to go on. It's not really staff's job to go out and seek information from the applicant. It's the applicant's job to file the application to convince the board that what they are doing complies with the regulations. Okay, so I think you saw evidence of animals there, but I still go back to I could have a goat or a horse on my property, whether I'm in the city or if I'm on 2 acres of land, like maybe some of these places. That doesn't mean that I'm actively deriving income. And that's my interpretation of the regulations. This board may have certainly a different interpretation of that.
I have a follow-up on that.
Hang on just a
You'll
second.
be able to-
We'll have a chance.
You have a chance.
I've got one question on your definition of agricultural purposes, land use for. One of the things that is indicated as considered to be land use for agricultural purposes is open hunting on agricultural land and hunting reserve. What is your definition of open hunting?
There isn't one in the zoning regulations, and so
Mr. Wilson, I know I referred that he'd been out there and hunted on that land quite a bit over the past.
If there's not a definition in the zoning regulations, then that word or phrase is subject to interpretation by, unfortunately, this board. So, there's many situations like that, I think, in our zoning regulations, fortunately or unfortunately, where things may be a little bit gray, and that's why we have a board to interpret the regulations as such. It's probably not the answer you're necessarily looking for, but yeah. But that, to that point though, that's why when we write zoning regulations, we try to make them as black and white as possible. You may not like the regulation, but at least it's black and white, then everybody knows what the interpretation of that regulation is.
Mark, would I be correct in assuming that the road in there is maintained by Grant Township? Is that correct?
Wilson Road would be maintained by the township. The road into here is maintained, this one's maintained by Ms. Quillin.
By who?
By the applicant, by the owner. It's her driveway. Yeah, it's her driveway. This is actually land that she owns, so it's under her control to maintain that.
if we're adding the possibility of another household in that area, I assume we'd be adding a little bit more traffic in there. Is the road determined to be passable most of the time? I mean, we all live in the country, and we know what muddy roads are. They happen to us all the time. But, you know, one of the things we worry about is, as was mentioned previously, accessibility for emergency vehicles, ambulance, and law enforcement. So if that was going to put in, we're going to put in more load on that driveway and require more maintenance. And my question was, who was going to be responsible for that? And so apparently it's Mr. Wilson and Ms. Quillin. So.
Yeah, because I would assume if everything goes as well, then, you know, then if the lot split is approved, then, you know, Ms. Quillin will own just the 7 acres. The rest of the land will be owned by Mr. Wilson. So then the maintenance of this access or driveway, if you will, would revert to Mr. Wilson at that point in time.
I guess the question is, Mr. Wilson, are you ready to build? Are you thinking, let's get this done and get on it? Or
I have a floor plan and I have a loan officer on the
this is not
phone.
something you're thinking about 20 years from now? You're thinking
No,
about this?
I'm ready. The
You're
sooner the better.
ready, and I don't expect you to break ground tomorrow.
No.
In the foreseeable future,
Mark, can you go back to the survey slide, please? Now, where would you be proposing to build in relation to the present current residence? You said right kind of next to it, but
Like,
how close?
see, like the red dot, is that about accurate?
Or would you be planning on using some of her outbuildings for your
No.
operation, or would you be constructing any other outbuildings?
Plan on building a house with a garage, and as far as outbuildings go at the time, that's it. I'm not gonna put more outbuildings on it. When she's done using her outbuildings, I'll want to. The one barn is not in good shape, and I'll probably come down to the other, they're still good. Her house is here, that's the barn. I'm planning on, this is the driveway, and it's just gonna go straight back. I have a house right here, right there. There's a tree line here, so it kind of divides the two, and there's a fence line there, so I figured that was the most reasonable, easiest route to make it just as accessible by anything that needs to come in there.
Mark, I know that we usually send this out to emergency management to look at these plans also, and you've been kind of response when you came back, but have you been able to get any response from them if this is a concern to them or not?
Yeah, I did. I don't have the email in front of me. I must have left it on my desk. I did reach out to Adam Weishart, who is Todd Strain's boss, and it's very interesting that Mr. Weishart had the opposite view of the situation, that he would have concerns with fire and other emergency services going down the road with another residence. So I thought that was very, very interesting that he had those concerns. You know, but saying that though, you know, I would like to, you know, just remind you a little bit here that the concern would be on any type of parcel, you know, with that. Sure, you know, Mr. Weishart would have concerns with another house being back there, fire access, police access, ambulance access, whatever. The concern Mr. Weishart had was if there is some type of fire here, then you've got one fire truck bringing water to the site, because obviously there's no hydrants out there. Another fire truck probably going out to get more water. There's no way those two trucks can cross each other necessarily. So he brought those types of concerns up to me. But to finish my thought here, though, you know, if this was all of her property there, and for whatever reason, you know, they wanted to build way back in here, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You know, there's no reason why, if this was like 160 acres, 80 acres, what have you, and no house here, you know, if Mr. Wilson wanted to go and build a house way back here and have a quarter-mile-long driveway, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be like, well, that's the risk that you're taking by building a quarter-mile-long driveway, whether it's made out of sand, dirt, asphalt, concrete. You know, you're taking the risk by living, you know, back in there and everything that comes with that, whether that be wildfires or, you know, ambulance, services. And so yeah, Mr. Weishar did have concerns about that, but I think you gotta think about it and compare it to any other type of situation that could be out there as well.
Any other questions? Lisa? Right now? Okay. Next step.
Okay, thank you.
I am out of practice, so I leapfrogged a piece of this that I needed. Are there any public comment other than the applicant here for this case?
At one point, Ms. Quillin had a,
Right, I was gonna bring it up to you, I was gonna get there. Want to give the public a chance. That's all right. Thanks for keeping me online. Thanks for keeping me online. Okay, does the applicant have any additional comments? Please step up to the podium.
Well, in response to your question about can that road maintain the traffic, there were 36 trucks that brought asphalt in. That road is covered and it's thick. So there's no problem there with it maintaining.
Thank you.
Second thing is, in response to yours, every year when I pay taxes and I submit them to the IRS, I submit my farm taxes too. My receipts, lost profit. So I think that's considered agriculture. When you're making some money off of the livestock you have. Farmers.
I'll add to that. The cattle that are on it, we're renting that part out to a farmer, Jeff Griffith. He's paying.
There are cattle or sheep on there most of the time.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all I wanted to comment.
The FSA office recognizes you as a farm.
I think so.
You may have to go in. I'm on the FSA committee, so I have to ask these.
Oh, okay.
Any other comments? Staff, you have Commissioner Button.
I don't have any rebuttal comments, Mr. Chairman.
Does the commission have any other further questions for the applicant? We'll close the public portion of this hearing. The public portion is now closed. Is there any discussion from the board?
I don't have any concerns about the agricultural aspect of this. It looks to me like it is being used for agricultural purposes, and Mr. Wilson's got plans for how he's going to manage it agriculturally, so I don't think that's an issue for us. For me, the only issue might be safety aspect, but as Mark noted, that would be an issue no matter, how they've constructed it on this property, so it's not unique to this particular situation.
and that's not a definite issue either, because at some point, this is going to be vacating the property. If Mr. Wilson's planning on tearing down another house, go back to one residence.
And it still might be a little bit of a safety issue on their part, but they just be aware of that. That's the risk that they take. Yeah.
At the time, if when the time comes that Ms. Quillin elects to vacate her home, you would have another home, what would happen with her? Do you still have two houses?
No, her house will get destroyed.
It'll be,
I'll take it back to grass or timber
would
around
not turn
there.
that into a rental house
No, sir.
on the property or a hunting lodge?
No. No, if there's hunting on there, it's just gonna be for her.
Mark, do we have other incidents where we have situations such as this with transfer of the acreage involved, which has been given a kind of a special applicable special treatment such as this?
None that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any other types of situations like that's come across my desk.
I think I share some of the same concerns as you have. This kind of opens up a different situation than we normally deal with. I'm not sure, as long as all our people remain friends, we're in good shape here. If it comes when someone else intervenes or they cease to be friends or the plot thickens at that point.
Well, as I understand it, you referred to 80 acres. Then the 7 acres that the Quillin owns would be basically deeded to you and
Yeah.
transfer on death.
But he wouldn't get it till,
There,
he wouldn't get
he
it.
wouldn't get it until she died, yeah.
One time, yeah.
But, you know, she would not be able to otherwise dispose of it.
To answer your question, Mr. Jordan, that's why we have the regulations in place that we do, and that's why we have the requirement of an egress easement that will get recorded with that other parcel, because, you know, I've had numerous incidents where people have come to me and said, we're friends, and we're great, and we all like to build 2 or 3 houses on this, and we're all gonna share, you know, one driveway, and everything is great, and then we issue a permit, and then something happens, somebody moves away a different way, the road is now maintained, it's not to the satisfaction of people that are living out there because that person had moved away. So then we have a bad situation where we've got people that are upset about the way a private driveway is being run, and here we've issued permits. That's why we put the egress easement in place, so that protects the rights of Ms. Quillin, who's living there now, and future owners should situation change and maybe he wants to sell out. Because, you know, he says that, you know, the house is going to be coming down, but he doesn't have to tear it down. There's no regulations that say he has to tear it down. He can certainly turn around and sell that 7 acres. But if he does that, then that person living there that may not be an acquaintance or neighbor of him can have the legal access and legal right to cross his property to be able to get out to the public road.
But that person still may live there and may be using that,
Yes,
maybe using his driveway, and then we're set up for a legal confrontation.
yes, but not involving the county.
It would be a civil.
I must say, I like the fact that you've worked up, I mean, other than the awkwardness of where the property is, I like the way that you worked this out. I think it could be a very good situation for all of you.
Like I said, Rita's not my friend, she's my family, so.
Any other discussion from the board? Chair will entertain a motion.
I move the case number 2020-02, the request of the Quillin, applicant Patrick Wilson, requesting the homestead agricultural lot split as per Article 3-106 of Reno County subdivision regulations for construction of a second single-family dwelling located at 1028 North Wilson Road, and as per the submitted site plan, be approved based on the application applying to subdivision regulations requirements for the homestead agricultural lot split for the reasons heard in this public hearing. I further move to attach the following conditions of approval for this application. 1, the legal description of egress easement for parcel 1 shall be filed at the Reno County Register of Deeds prior to issuance of a zoning permit. 2, parcel 2 shall comply with all requirements of the Reno County Sanitation Code. And 3, a zoning permit shall be required on parcel 1 and 2 for any structure over 120 square feet in size.
Second motion.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, staff, please call the roll.
Seltzer,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Jorns,
Yes.
French,
Yes.
Gertson.
Yes.
We have to wait a couple of weeks, and like I said, this should go in front of the Board of County Commissioners June 9th at 9 a.m. And you're welcome to attend but there won't be any public discussion at that point. You can certainly listen to the proceedings there.
June 9th at 10?
9 a.m. 10 a.m. I'll be in touch with you when I can confirm that.
Thank
you. Yep.
Appreciate all that were connected to this case. We're going to take a short pause in order to let the other applicants for the second case kind of make a people swap here, so we can still practice on social distancing and allow them in the room anytime that they need. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I guess I'm not.
I sympathize with Ken Shorn here in Carolina, because they need to speak somehow in here. Ken, did you get my message the other day
Thank you.
for Doug? I'm sorry wasn't very prompt with that.
I haven't used it yet anyway.
Okay, I hope all that's accurate. It's the last I had.
I've been thinking for 30 years already, but I never knew where it was.
I do so.
I thought that was him down in Texas, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So how are you doing? I'm doing good.
I top of the world. Got a little rain. I sympathize with Ken here. Need some kind of PA now. Some kind of.
They used to sit right over there next to the speakers, there was three of us here. I couldn't hear them. Now they put me over here and the podium's over there. I still can't hear.
Need some type of.
My wife says I have selective hearing. Yeah.
I have heard that comment
That term
before,
you used as well?
and I know she does, you know. Well, I'm glad I finally got back with you on that.
I'm glad I'm not the only person that's suffering this now. I've got a breakdown about a hearing aid here sometime, not too distant future.
Yep.
And God bless him, Mr. Wilson was a fine gentleman, he's a big guy, but he was very soft-spoken.
You're supposed to get some rain this morning. I think it's supposed to rain home from now through the weekend. I think it was.
Already got it.
Yeah. Come up, maybe I can hear a little better. When they're talking about direction, you gotta hear. We need some kind of
Thanks,
sound.
thanks for your patience in changing of the guard and whatnot, so if we will get started with the second case of the evening, case 2020-03, a request by Josephine and Susan K. Leonard Trust, applicant Branch Communications, Cole Talbot, for a conditional use permit to construct a not to exceed 199 feet tall self-support telecommunication tower with ground equipment. Property is zoned R1, rural residential district, and is located east of Scotty Lane at the termination of East Elma Drive and south of the property address 4101 East Elma Drive. Would the applicant please come forward? State your name and address for the record, please.
Right one. Oh, sorry. All right, good there. Sorry. Good evening, everybody. My name is Cole Talbot, and I am a site development agent for Branch Communications, and we are representing U.S. Cellular on this project. I'd like to start by saying thank you tonight for taking the time to meet with the uncertain times and everything. I know it is trying for some people. I appreciate you guys being here. And to Mark as well, this project's kind of gone on for a while, and a lot of phone calls and emails, so I appreciate all the time that he spent on this as well. As everyone knows, this project was originally proposed in a different location. After a lot of concern was quickly raised from the community, Branch Communications, we relayed the message to U.S. Cellular and convinced U.S. Cellular to look at alternative options, alternative locations for this project. And eventually, after some discussions, there wasn't we found a location that was approved to move forward with from U.S. Cellular. That was discussed with the county, with some constituents of the community, and U.S. Cellular as well. I'm going to pass out a packet that I put together with some information that I'll explain. I'll go through with everyone. Who wants to start here? You just take one and pass it. Thank you.
Refresh my memory, this was several months ago. And
Yes.
We've been dormant here for a couple of months.
That is correct.
You were up closer to the number 7. On
That is correct. Yes, sir. It's been several months, and there's been quite a bit of due diligence done on this location at the request of the county to meet the ordinance and other things as well.
I'm trying to make sure I'm on the same
Yes, sir.
page.
Definitely. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So this site, this project is what we call a macro site. A macro site is the best way I can define a macro site is in two ways. The first way being serving as an offload to existing sites. So if you look on the first page, there's a graph there or a chart there that says existing U.S. Cellular in-building coverage. And you'll notice there is some red dots kind of in various locations on the map. This location is in the middle, almost the exact distance from each of those sites. So this macro site main goal is to serve as an offload to those sites. Those sites are probably 300 to 400 foot guy towers in rural areas that at one time provided coverage to this area, and due to growth and development, technology change as well, those sites are not working at the efficiency that they once were. So this macro site will provide an offload to those sites and allow those sites to work at a higher efficiency and provide better coverage to those areas, as well as a targeted area here. So if you go to the second page, it would be that it's the proposed coverage, and you'll see that it fills in a gap in about a 2 to 3 mile radius over this area on your map there. This tower is proposed to be 179 foot tall. The antennas would be placed on the tower at 175 foot, and that's what we call a rad center. The reason that this is lower is also, as we mentioned, to serve as an offload, but also to provide very direct coverage to these areas. The main struggle for U.S. Cellular users in this area is drop calls due to in-building coverage, the lack of in-building coverage. So this will provide if you're going in a building or going in your home or in a basement, U.S. cellular carriers will have the ability to stay on their phone. If they're downloading something or working from home or in your office, this will provide high-speed data from your mobile device or your tablet or iPad, as well as hotspot and broadband Wi-Fi services. This tower will bring those capabilities to this area that's shown on your map there.
What are the circles on that?
So I'll explain those, and we're going to go to page 3, and I'll explain this. Yes, ma'am. So Mark did ask that I address the possibility of co-location. Co-location is always the first option that we look at for existing towers around that we can place antennas on. It's cheaper and it's quicker. The 2 towers that we discussed and that were looked at there was a tower owned by We Star Energy that's on the transmission plant, and it was a 150-foot self-supporting tower that already has 2 carriers on it and a dish. I'm not sure if the dish was a fiber dish or a Wi-Fi dish. So that being the case, the highest rad center that you'd be able to get on that tower would probably be somewhere in the range of 120 feet, best case scenario, probably even lower than that. So we would not get the height that we needed to provide the coverage to the area on that tower if it was even structurally capable with 2 carriers already on it. There's a Crown Castle site a little over a mile northwest of the proposed location as well. This tower we actually considered as a candidate. We went through the co-location process with Crown Castle, and we ran an RF study. That's page 3. And you'll see even on page 3 there is a little bit less coverage, and it does leave some gaps there on the south half of the map there. And the RF study was ran at 199 feet, which is the height of that tower. Crown Castle came back and said that 165 feet would be the best case scenario that they could do for us for our antenna, U.S. cellular antennas to go on their tower. So you were going to see even more of a decrease on coverage if we were to go on that tower. So it would not serve the same purpose nearly at all, and it would create the need for another macro site in the future with more growth or technology change as well. Would like to say the main goal and what the narrative that we would like to maintain tonight and with this project is that Branch Communications and U.S. Cellular's main initiative is to serve the community and provide affordable service and efficient service, an alternative, other options, and we want to be a competitor and provide those services to the constituents of Hutchinson and Reno County. U.S. Cellular has complied and met 100% of the county ordinance for wireless communications towers, and we have also complied federally and at the state level of all requirements regarding telecommunications applications and structures. If there is any other questions at this time, I would be happy to answer those, and I do ask if this application is approved on the basis that we have met 100% of the requirements asked for wireless communications towers. And in your packets there, I've also included an aerial of the exact location on Mr. Leonard's property for you to look at, and then I've also included a site plan survey in the very back of your packet there.
I'm looking at the site plan survey.
Yes, sir.
It makes reference to a 195 foot self.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we have modified that.
Yes, sir, that is modified. That's the only thing that hasn't been modified.
What is it now,
179.
179?
Yes, sir. The reason that hasn't changed is our lease area will stay the same. 100 foot by 100 foot is the lease area on the property, and then we're only going to be fencing a 60 by 60 max. That would be the maximum area that we would even fence off on the area, on the property. And I did submit the FAA letter. I don't know. I brought one copy of it. I don't know if it was passed out or not, but I do have a copy of it if anyone would like to see it.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of the board items.
would this one be suitable for co-location for other things?
Yes, ma'am, it would, and those drawings have been submitted to the county. It would be suitable for up to 4 and encouraged for up to for 3 additional carriers. The initial carrier would be U.S. Cellular, and then we would be structurally able to hold up to 3 other carriers as well.
Mark, you have a question?
Mr. Talbot, you testified here that it's going to be a 179-foot tall tower. However, I have email correspondence and new plans from you that say 178 foot. So
Okay.
could you clarify?
I apologize. I said 179. 178 is correct. I apologize for that.
I just want
I
to say
missed
for the
that.
record.
Typo. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. Second question I have then is on these plans that you had submitted to me, and I provided a copy to the board. On page C4, which is a picture of the tower, it has some wording on here that says that the tower is going to be lit. So can you state for the record whether it's going to be lit or not lit?
Yes, it would be lit in accordance with the FAA, just because it's within 3 miles of an airport, so that is a requirement. Anything within 3 miles is to be
The
lit.
lighting is on top of the tower.
Just on top, yes, sir.
So,
Flashing red light.
Yeah, just a flashing red at night, and it changes during the day, yes, sir.
so typically towers that are less than 200 don't require to be lit, but in this case, we're near the Hutchinson Airport, so that's why the FAA is requiring lighting.
That's correct.
So I didn't know if this was just a carryover from the other plans that were submitted and wasn't taken off, or if it actually has to be lit.
Yeah, anything within 3 miles is, unless it's very, very, very small in certain cases, but typically anything within 3 miles is required to be lit. If it's not, then, like you mentioned, 200 feet is the cutoff.
That's all the question I have, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff report?
Ian Mark, Financial County Planner. If you heard, this is a request to construct a telecommunications tower, and as Mr. Jordan previously mentioned, we had an original application located on parcel number 7. Is to the north of here. That met with some resistance from the community in the area, and so the applicant decided to pull that request before we had the public hearing and resubmit a new request to the one we're considering tonight, which is down here on parcel 21. Parcel 7 and parcel 21 is still owned by Mr. Joe Leonard here, and so it's not a different owner of the property, it's a different parcel of land that he owns. The original application said that it was going to be a 195-foot tall tower. The new location, when they were submitting information to the FAA, said it can be no taller than 178 feet, and that's what you had heard here tonight, that it is going to be a 170-foot tall tower, and that is per the FAA requirements. It can be no taller than that. The lease area is a 100-foot by 100-foot area. Access will be by a 30-foot wide easement that crosses the property. Couple of issues that I will bring to the board's attention that I believe we do have resolved finally. Again, this is the site right here. You have Old K61 Highway up here. Stotty Lane goes north. It kind of then curves into Elma Drive, and then it dead ends into Mr. Leonard's property. And so the tower company will have to have an easement across Mr. Leonard's property. But as well as some other property here that we'll get into. For those of you who don't know, we're just right north of the city limits of the city of Hutchinson. And so the city of Hutchinson is down here on the bottom of the map. This is kind of a blow-up of the property, and will help us me discuss a couple of other issues that we had. So access to the tower site, which is over in this area, is going to be through Elma Drive. It's going to cross, go through the driveway, come down, follow Mr. Leonard's actual driveway. It's going to go and snake in between the 2 buildings here, and then come out and go into the lease area. So the company has a lease agreement with Mr. Leonard to be able to provide that. If you see here on the aerial, if you got good eyes or so, a corner of the driveway actually is being shown as being on this person's property here, and so US Cellular had to get a small easement to be able to cross their property. They have done that. I have partial easement agreement here. I have it signed by the applicants here, or the owners here, but I don't have it from US Cellular side, but that will have to be obtained before they can actually, be able to cross their property. The other concern here is you see this is actually being identified as a small separate parcel of ground that is technically not owned by Mr. Leonard as shown. However, you do have correspondence from Homer Gilson, who is a registered land surveyor, and he has done research on this and has determined that this parcel really does not exist. The reason it is showing here from the Reno County Appraisers Department is when this area was being developed many, many years ago, surveyors go out there and they locate what they call section corners, and they survey off land based off of those section corners. And if you read Mr. Gilson's letter, I think it's a situation where one surveyor uses one set of section corners, the other one uses another set, and when they draw up new parcels such as this one, or maybe this one, other ones in the area, those parcels did not match, and so the appraiser's office added this small parcel in here instead. But in reading Mr. Gilson's letter to the board, which was stamped by a certified registered land surveyor, this parcel does not exist, and so I'm sure US Cellular and myself, I am confident, that this does not exist and that they still have the legal right to access this tract of ground out here.
Mark, does that apply just to that little strip there, or to the entire, is the piece on the east side?
This is all, if you look at our parcel mapping, this all is being shown as one parcel of land.
And so,
But it's a situation where, like I say, different surveyors use different points of beginning.
so the little narrow strip belongs to the Lutherans, and so what about on the east side of that other?
Over here, this will belong to the gentleman that owns this parcel of ground right here. But this strip of land in between is being shown to be is owned by Mr. Leonard. So there is not a small 20-foot gap between these two parcels of ground. Because I can almost guarantee you US Cellular is not going to put a tower there if they don't have the legal right to access that property. Okay, so that was two of the issues that we had to work through with Mr. Talbot here on that. The lease agreement that you have in your packet does provide a means to remove that tower. However, I would point out, I think it's a very important aspect of this case is that statute kind of prohibits us from requiring monies to be set aside to be able to remove towers. And so I see ourselves here needing to probably do a future text amendment to our regulations to kind of comply with state statute. And probably at this point, I'd like to maybe digress from the staff report a little bit and kind of go over the statutory requirements here. In 2018, it was passed by the state legislature, statute 66-2019. The main focus of that statute was to permit cell tower companies to put antennas and whatnot in the road right of way without having to go through a review process. However, like most statutes, if you're familiar, they always have additional add-ons, and so in addition to those requirements for the road right of way, they also, the state legislature added 18 additional conditions and items that we cannot consider when looking at a new cell tower proposal. You do have a copy of those statutes here. I think I'll highlight probably 5 of them that I think pertain to us mainly here. The first one is to require an applicant to submit information about or evaluate an applicant's business decisions with respect to the applicant's design service, customer demand for service, or quality of the applicant's service to or from a particular area or site. It goes on from there, but that's the first part of that requirement here in the state statute. Number 2 is to require information that concerns the specific need for the wireless support structure, including if the service to be provided from the wireless support structure is to add additional wireless coverage or additional wireless capacity. An authority may not require proprietary, confidential, or other business information to justify the need for the new wireless support structure, including propagation maps and telecommunication traffic studies. And so you cannot require of the applicant, show me the maps where there is a gap in the coverage. If U.S. Cellular or another cell tower company desires to put a tower up here, we have to look at what our current regulations allow. We cannot base a decision based off of the need or a surmised gap or so in coverage. Number 3 is to evaluate an application based on the availability of other potential locations for the placement of wireless support structures or wireless facilities, including but not limited to the option to co-locate instead of construct a new wireless support structure or for the substantial modification of a support structure. So you heard Mr. Talbot testify that they did look at other towers in the area, and as he had mentioned, there's one at the former Westar Energy Center there. There's one that was put up. We did not have a hearing on that one for those of you who were on the board maybe back then because it was zoned industrial, and at the time towers were permitted by right in an industrial zoning district. The other one is the Crown Tower that you heard kind of north of town there by the K61 storage. They looked at that tower. Again, did not meet their needs according to what they had said. But again, with the statute written in 2018, we cannot base a decision based off of whether they can or cannot co-locate on an existing tower. The other one is, like what I just referred to, is to impose surety requirements, including bonds, escrow deposits, letters of credit, or any other type of financial surety to ensure that abandoned or unused facilities can be removed. And it goes on from there. And then the last one I would mention is to impose a greater setback or fall zone requirement for a wireless support structure than for other types of commercial structure of similar size. And so we can't say, well, you're a cell tower, so you have to have a greater setback than another similar type of tall structure that we would look at. And like I say, the list goes on and on. A lot of them maybe have to do with building code requirements and fees assessed for like a cell tower proposal or for a permit for a cell tower. So as you can see, the state legislature kind of took a lot of the review authority, I think, out of cell tower locations. There's still things that we should and need to look at with a cell tower proposal here, though. One such requirement would be setbacks and yard requirements here. Originally, as you saw in my staff report, I did have concerns with the original setback requirements here. At the time, we were looking at a 195-foot tall tower. I had questions on the south property line down here of that tower not meeting those concerns. My calculations came to about 187-foot setback from that south side, and so a 195-foot tall tower would obviously not meet our requirement of a 1-to-1 ratio. The other setbacks I calculated to be 247 feet from the north property line right there, 300 feet from the east, and then 204 feet from the west property line. Since now you heard testimony that we are reducing that cell tower down to 178 feet, that tower, should it lay down from its base, will not fall on the property owner's land down in here. I don't know if you know, but you should, that cell towers are not designed to obviously lay down from their base. They're designed to collapse among themselves. But that is a setback requirement that we have to help just ensure that should something catastrophic happen there, that tower will, if it does lay down, still remain on Mr. Leonard's property here. Parking and paving, there really is no parking and paving requirements with this type of land use, but there is adequate room for service vehicles to be able to stay on the lease area and be able to turn around and do their maintenance on that tower should this be approved. Sign requirements, you saw in your packet, I believe I gave you a copy of that. There are 5 kind of warning signs or so, on there. There's not going to be other type of signs. There's the typical warning signs that are required with the construction of the tower. County does not have any landscaping requirements to impose on a cell tower. However, with this process, should you choose to do something like that, you most certainly are within authority to be able to do and impose landscaping requirements. Lighting, I had to correct this here because the old report, it was my understanding that there wasn't going to be lights on this tower. You did hear testimony here that due to FAA requirements, there will have to be a light that is on this tower due to its proximity from the Hutchinson Airport. So, so there will be a light on there. As far as fencing goes, there is a diagram on here showing the fencing. If I can get there. Probably not going to work here today. There's the fencing, so they're looking at a 6-foot tall chain link fence with a foot of barbed wire, and that will only go around a 60-foot by 60-foot area, so it's not going to go around the entire lease area. It will go around a 60-foot by 60-foot area to help deter unwanted trespassers from getting access to the tower area. Next part of the report, talks about all the factors that you should consider when you're making a recommendation in any kind of conditional use permit. I don't know if you would like me to go through, or if you had questions on those. I've reviewed all of those factors in here, and really there was nothing that really stood out that would say would be a major concern or so. With that, like I said, a lot of the factors in here, when you compare them to state statute requirements, well, we can't really consider that anymore. But in reviewing all of the factors that we have in here, I did find that the applicant has met most of those factors under your consideration. Okay, so, with that, I think, I will let you answer any questions with that. Staff did recommend approval of this request to construct the tower based off of those 10 factors. And then I have 6 and 7, actually, recommended conditions of approval. Number 1 is approval is for a not to exceed 170-foot tall telecommunication tower, not including the antennas and the lightning rod, at the location shown on the site plan dated April 13, 2020, and submitted with this petition. No lighting shall be illuminated on the telecommunication tower except that which complies with and does not exceed the minimum FAA requirements. And our regulations say that you cannot have any high-intensity strobes or nighttime strobes will be permitted with that tower. Number 3 is 6-foot tall chain link fence with 1 foot of barbed wire, as indicated on the approved site plan, shall be installed within 30 days of the tower becoming operational and maintained at all times. 4th one, should the tower be unused for a period of 12 months or more, the tower will be declared abandoned and order to be removed and the land reclaimed as per the submitted land lease agreement with Mr. Leonard. 5 is the applicant shall submit the FAA no hazard determination letter prior to the issuance of the zoning permit. I can tell you that I already have that determination right now. I just left that in as a standard condition of approval that we always kind of do and consider with cell towers. The 6th one is the applicant shall meet all applicable federal, state, and local regulations. That is a standard condition that we put on all conditional use permits. And then the 7th one is the county reserves the right to rescind the conditional use permit should any violation of county regulations or conditions that govern this approval. That again is a standard condition that we have on there. So if for some reason the chain link fence, for example, is not installed within 30 days afterwards, we could go back before the Board of County Commissioners and have the conditional use permit revoked. So that'd be like an example of how we would apply that condition number 7. With that, so the pictures, I did not go out and actually take a picture of the actual cell tower site. Mr. Talbot did give you kind of a blow up of that area. This is the drawing that you were sent in your packet here. My question was up in here where it says that there's a proposed tower lighting. Like I said before, typically, towers less than 200 feet do not have to be lit, but because of the proximity to the airport, this one does. These other, this would be U.S. Cellular's antenna. The other ones here are the other ones that they would be able to lease out to other carriers should they decide to locate their antenna on there. our regulations say that you should provide 48 antenna sites, and so what that does is let other carriers come onto a tower without having to go through another process to construct another tower. This again, I think, is something that you guys had in your site plan and in your packet here. Right in here is the other property. So right this corner right here is where they are crossing this person's property. So that's why they needed to have that lease agreement. And again, the driveway just kind of goes, snakes around the house, and goes in between his two buildings, and then kind of comes out into the lease area. And these are pictures of the area. So with that, I'd stand for any questions the board may have.
One question I have, just out of curiosity, if at some point this tower is considered abandoned, what recourse does the county or whoever have for removal of that?
The county would not really get involved in necessarily something like that. There is an established lease agreement. I think that would be the role of the county, really, to ensure that there is some method that maybe that tower could be taken down. In the lease agreement that they have with Mr. Leonard, it talks about should the tower become abandoned, and in that lease agreement, it lists the specifics of that agreement in there where they would take that down, and it talks about who owns what out there and how they will restore the land. And so I think that's really probably the county's role, is to ensure that something like that is in place. Yeah, it's really a private. Yeah, it's really something. It's something private like that. I don't think the county wants to get into something that's on private property and try to ensure that something is torn down. It's really our job to see to it that the property owner is really kind of protected in that sense, and there is some type of lease agreement in place and some kind of method to tearing it down.
Am I mistaken? I thought there was a surety bond in the law.
It says, yeah, in that lease. Yeah, I think in the lease agreement there's something in there.
I had a question also. What is that property used for right now? Is it grass and grazing and pasture?
Looking at it, like I said, I did not go out to the property. They could maybe come back in a rebuttal and tell you what they're used for, but it's mainly probably just grassland, I would say.
Maybe I can ask Mr. Talbot, as I understood, the removal would take place, the tower and everything above ground would be up to you to remove should the tower ever become abandoned.
Yes,
I had a question about, I assume you're going to do some site development and do some graveling and such that you don't try to clear off the gravel or anything like that. The reason I ask is I have a tower also on some land I farm. I don't own the area, but I know that was cultivated land at one time. The tower company came in and leveled up did some leveling, and they brought in several loads of very nice gravel.
Right.
If that tower was ever to be removed and that site cleared, it says in the lease they will try to make it farmable again.
Yes, sir.
Which means taking off that layer of gravel, white rock.
Yes, sir. Anything that's leased or with the access easement is restored back to original grade and 1 foot below.
And original condition?
Yes, sir, original condition upon abandonment or termination of the lease.
Yeah, I just didn't see anything about gravel. I saw above ground.
Yes, sir.
Facilities in your lease. I didn't see anything about the gravel or
It is, yes.
That would seem to be less important than a condition where it's grazing land. But if it was cultivated land or farmable land where tillage is involved, that would be important to me anyway. So as long as you're in a position to say that you will clean that up and restore it to original condition,
100%.
I appreciate that.
Mark, you had a little bit in your report, but could you talk a little bit about the impact to roads and bridges during construction phase?
Sure. So Scotty Lane, kind of not really shown too good on this, maybe I can do the other one. So Scotty Lane is, an asphalt township road. And then Elma Drive is a dirt road.
Still a township road?
Still a township road. There's very few township roads that are asphalt, but there are some. mainly near probably, the city here, but, so, what I had in my report, and probably what you're alluding to, is that the applicant should, visit with the Public Works Department and get what we call an oversized overweight permit, should one be needed. That's not something that's in my department that I monitor, so I don't know if they ever have to. I don't know if the loads that they are carrying, need those types of permits. But it's always my, suggestion that if you're carrying heavier components that don't meet the weight limit, requirement, then they need those permits from us. So we need to review that so they're not going over bridges that can't meet their, capacity. We will give them the route. And so it's my suggestion, that they always do that if they're going to be not a legal weight or a legal length, for that matter too. But if they are a legal length and a legal weight limit, then they are permitted, just like anybody else, to go on a township road, regardless of their weight and somewhat regardless of what they would do to a road. There's nothing really we can do. These roads are not in our jurisdiction at the county level to monitor or maintain. My report probably also talked about that they should also probably get with the township, to talk to them about, those roads, should there be a situation where, they might potentially tear up a road.
And you have not had any comments from the township?
I have not had any comments from the township. The other thing that I was probably lax in mentioning here is that this area is actually also within the city of Hutchinson's extra area of influence, if we will. And so application and everything was sent to the city of Hutchinson Planning Department way back in February. No, yeah, back then, did not receive any comment from them on that. So sent it to them on that one, sent it to them on this one. Both times did not receive any comment from the city of Hutchinson. So they should not have any concerns with that. Does that answer your question, good enough?
But essentially, all the ingress and egress passes through Mr. Leonard's property.
Yep, once
Other
they,
than a small little corner.
other than that small corner right there, and that's just the driveway. I think, this is not a cul-de-sac right here or anything like per se, it's just, you can see the road right away just kind of dead ends right there. And so the way the driveway is shaped, and when they got the survey back, it kind of showed that, a portion of that, you can probably see it here a little bit better. You can see the driveway just cuts the very corner. And mind you, though, that, these parcels aren't survey accurate here. It is showing that it is on that property, but if you actually look at your survey too, it's pretty close to what we're showing right there. And so they had to get that.
What's referred to as a circuitous route.
Yeah.
So
they come here.
Get down into the tower.
Yeah. So they'll fall here and then go down in between the buildings and then come out that way.
We're not putting any responsibility on the township to maintain that. That's going to be maintained by
Absolutely not.
by the applicants or Mr. Thomas or.
Exactly. Yeah. This is not, after you exit here, it's not the township's responsibility. You did receive comments. We had two citizens that were against one property, and then you did receive correspondence just that I got today by email and by written comments that are on your table. So. Anything else from me?
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make some public comments? Please step to the podium and state your name and address.
Can we leave this slide up, Mark?
Excuse me, what?
Can we leave this slide up?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I'm still down. So.
Okay, I'll try to talk loud. My name is Matt Clark. I live at 4201 East 56 on the home that's right there, across there, the street. I want to be clear to start this off with. I have nothing that I say here should be considered as a critique to the Leonards. They seem like fine people. U.S. Cellular, who we need, truthfully, we need here in Reno County, and they seem like a fine company. Nor do I want this to be viewed as a problem with the county. As a Christian, I will submit to your decisions. That said, I did put in opposition to this. I worked with 2 county planners from different counties, of course, obviously, as well as legal authority on how to submit this in opposition in the most respectful way I could. We'll walk through it real quick. I believe Mark said he forwarded it to you. Essentially, I would like to point out some of the issues as put out by the 1978 Kansas Supreme Court ruling, Golden versus the Overland Park, City of Overland Park, which gives you, Mark provided a pamphlet as well to consider. This statute is put in place to protect those for situations such as this. I highlight 8 reasons in which you can deny this request based on the legal statute that is put here within this report. We'll talk about that piece of land later as it says. Looking through here, if you go to my second page, I put out the first one, which is just a simple observation of the zoning character of the neighborhood. Factually, you can tell from here, we've got a rural residential area out in the middle of the county. No one has any major obstructions. The tallest thing is probably a flagpole, maybe 60 feet. There's a couple trees that are probably roughly 60 feet as well. To say that this would not change the nature or the character of the neighborhood seems to be quite a contradiction. No one moves into a rural residential area to live by a cell phone tower, or no one pays the money to live in the county to then have something that is clearly not a, what would you call it, rural area type proceedings. You can likewise see I have pictures here from the state park. This will be observable from all the state park, which is a little bit further to the east. I didn't use a zoom. I have multiple pictures. This will be a visible site from the state park. Noticing that the tallest cottonwood tree in Kansas is 98 feet. This will tower above it because that's why it's a cell phone tower. Likewise, on table 1, I highlight the population density of the area. If you work through the population of Reno County minus the land area, the county or the country area, so outside of the MSA, roughly is about 12 persons per square foot. Within this radius here, you're looking at a population of 133 persons per square mile. I said that wrong, it's 12 persons per square mile. In the country here, it would be more than 10 times that. So again, we're talking about a very dense area to be placing such a nature. Secondly, the question to meet the golden factors, we have to ask the question of, is the property being prohibited as it is currently zoned, which it's not. As Mr. Jorans pointed out, it is being used as zoned, residential, or roughly it's kind of your natural country area. So the special permit, or as it is zoned now, is not prohibiting the use in which it was intended to for some time. Number 3, detrimental to the nearby county, or nearby property, which I'll point out on the house. This will be approximately northeast. This will be viewable from my kitchen, dining room, deck. We're going to see it when we pull in, as you can tell from the pictures of the park. I put in the facts, put in multiple studies here on places who have pointed out the loss of property value. Here I quote the science, law, public policy: 94% of home buyers are less interested to pay. 1,000 home buyers, 79% said that they would under no circumstances purchase or rent a property near a cell phone tower. Likewise, I pointed into a Hutchison news article in July 15, 2014, which has some difficult quotes to read. Understand we need cell phone towers, and placing them in a residential area will indeed have a negative effect, as I point out by several studies, also put in here from academics, as well as real estate journals, of the net loss that you would take. Now, I understand that we have to do this, but as a recent home purchaser, I purchased this back in September. If this were to drop my value by 10 or 20%, I'll be out of compliance on my loan, right? Not only will it be a loss of value, but now I'm going to have to go back and put in more money to make it up. So if this drops my value by $30,000, $40,000, which is roughly the per capita income in Reno County, I will have to put that money back in to make this right. I'm likely going to have to figure out what to do with the parcel of land as well. I brought the title insurance I have, as well as some documents Mr. Leonard had worked up. The county allowed a deed on that piece of property that Mr. Gillison talked about, Mark also mentioned. They allowed in 1984 that to be deeded, and it's likely that, I know it's been taxed on my property since 1984, it's likely that Mr. Leonard has had to pay taxes on that as well. since 1984 and perhaps even longer. So where I'm going with this is I've been taxed on it since 1984, and now suddenly it's not mine when we want to put a cell phone tower in the area. It's very difficult. At minimum, I'm going to have to rework my loan. If we go all the way through this process, we'll have to work it out with the title company. I'll have to rework it with my bank. That's not your fault. I understand you're not in that nature. But if the bank does an appraisal and finds out that my house is down 10%, then I've got to make up the difference, of course. So there are issues to consider with that. Talk to the title insurance company. There is no transaction of it being taken out of Mr. Leonard's estate, but there is transaction of being put into our estate, as I mentioned, in 1984. I have the title insurance here, information for it, and of course you can go talk to them. So the county has allowed that to be deeded in 84 and double taxed since. And in fairness, I want to be 100% clear. Mr. Leonard had no idea, had no idea this was the case. He's not doing anything nefarious here. I want to be absolutely clear about that. That would be my main concern about this situation. Now, golden factor number 4 argument, I note, this is appropriately zoned as intended, Mr. Jordan had talked about. Number 5 considers the net benefit to the county, and this is where I want to talk about coverage. As Mr. Talbot talked, I know Marcus said you cannot base your decision on that. However, a decision put forward on is it beneficial, and since Cole talked about it, you'll notice the area coverage map I include at my property address, 4201 East 56. I don't know if this is in color or not. You can pull it up now. I pulled this up in my basement. It says I have the best possible coverage the U.S. Cellular has outside of 5G, which I believe had Iowa, Minnesota, a few other areas. So clearly there's an issue here. We've got some differing opinions. Likewise, I called the U.S. Cellular office downtown again, find people, meet them here. They mentioned I would have no coverage issues where I'm at. So I realize Mark is telling you cannot base your decision on that, but I think it's totally fair and appropriate. Then you cannot base your decision on it for it as well. Likewise, as it relates to the golden factor, the ability to benefit the county is quite diminished. 6, and I want to spend a little more time here. You'll notice I quote specifically the Reno County Comprehensive Plan, which kind of in the middle of that part there points out I bolded an area that was not bolded in the plan. That's my bolding. Apologize, I didn't include that. It says limiting the impacts and decisions that are based solely on the desires of an individual without regard to the effect of neighboring landowners, which is what the comprehensive plan says you will not do. You'll remember we had significant opposition to this. We moved it a few thousand feet south, which helped eliminate the radius of individuals who could come and go today. We've also, that was back in December, so I don't know where we are now, May, I guess. Time flew with coronavirus. But you'll notice that this would indeed, of course, be benefiting an individual at the loss of others for further property value and experience. Finally, 7 and 8. These are probably somewhat minor points, but it is worth your time to go check out Scotty Lane for number 7. That area, that perfectly great great neighborhood. Road, though, itself has numerous potholes. I think Mark is wise to make sure that should be worked through with the county and the city to make sure it can support whatever Mr. Talbot. I'm not a machine expert. I have no idea what they need, but that would be a key factor in which to consider this. Finally, 8, there was significant opposition to this. We moved it south to get the radius of people who couldn't come in. There are others here who are not here today, I assume, which is understandable, their choice, but there is opposition to this. I conclude on this, just kind of some minor points that we need U.S. Cellular, we need cell phone towers. I'm not at all against that. I'm completely for county growth. But just ignoring some of the key issues here to get this done seems a little short-sighted in my view. Not only have I put through the legal issues here with Kansas Supreme Court, I put out your own Reno County Commission report, your comprehensive plan. We have some land issues that need to be worked out, and not saying that it will come out to be that I absolutely own this land and I can stop it. I don't actually think that's the case. But since 1984, we've got a little problem here, okay? Those are my views on this. Again, I want to stress, I'm not at all against growth for the county. And I'm not even against cell phone towers as it stands. I am against just blanketing this without thinking clearly about what is out there and what the problems could and couldn't be for the community. I'll offer any questions. I think I'm probably past my 5 minutes. Sure. Good. Thank you, guys.
I was reading the material, I'm sorry, where is your residence, sir, can you show
But
me?
yeah,
I think you showed it once and I
Yeah.
was.
Mark's
I got it. Right there.
You move around a lot there.
I'm sorry. It's everywhere. Right here?
That's the home.
You're about as far away from the proposed site now as you were before, weren't you?
Yeah, Mark or Mr. Leonard could clarify. It was somewhere like right up here.
The other tower is like out.
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. The second question I have concerns your first photo posted in the material and at the RV park area, and you're comparing the height of the cottonwood trees. Would the tower be in front of the cottonwood trees, or would it be behind?
Okay, so from the first photo there, the one on the top of the page is of the RV park. There it would be a little bit to the south, and my understanding, a little bit to the east of that very tall cottonwood tree. that you
It's
see.
behind the tree row there, that's in the picture.
Yeah, it would be behind that. Those
It would
trees
be
are
taller than the trees in the company.
Yeah.
It would be behind the tree row.
roughly, yeah. Same thing on the bottom one. You can see the very top of those cottonwood trees. They're maybe, I don't know, 70 feet tall or
Thank
so.
you. I'm just trying to get a mental picture together. Do we have any documentation from the appraiser's office in this county with regard to loss of property value based upon cell phone towers presence that we could turn to?
There's no data that I'm aware of right now. And, I think regarding the loss of property value, I think, you also consider there's many different factors that go into, a property's value out there. And certainly a cell tower could be one, but there's other economic factors and everything. So I don't know, if you can put so much weight into just one cell tower going into an area, what that would do to the property values. But yeah, there's no data that I'm aware of from the appraiser's office.
Thank you very much.
Any other?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead. Any other comments from the audience?
Okay.
Going first.
Okay, I'll go first then. Okay, well,
Name and address, please.
all right, I'm Joe Leonard, and I live at 4101 Elma, and I'm the one that's bringing all this about, I guess. Okay, my first point is, Matt, I have a question for you. When you were buying that property from Tim, did Tim tell you that that tower was coming in?
No, we didn't have he said that there was a proposal at one point, but he said no, it wasn't coming in. He didn't mention it's coming in. After we signed the papers at the title insurance, then he mentioned, hey, by the way, there was a proposal for this.
Yeah, because I'm going to say, Tim knew well in advance of signing the contract with you that the tower was coming in. I had told him, and so had Bill Hain. So if you have a problem with your property value in terms of that cell tower, your problem is with Tim and not with me.
Yeah, I have no problems with you, to be clear.
Okay, all right. Otherwise, when I got that little strip of, where am I here? Okay, yeah, this little strip here. At the same time, Tim also had a quit claim deed. Well, there was enough errors in that thing. I'm really glad you didn't sign that. But when the surveyor checked everything out and I heard that he'd come up with the proof that 15-foot strip did not exist. Well, I got a measuring wheel, and I went out and measured from my north fence down to this point right here, and I came out with less than a foot of where the county appraiser's office said that distance should be. So I'm convinced in my own mind, and you should probably be convinced in your own mind too, that 15-foot strip just is not there. It was a measuring error put in by people who should have been checking things out better when they were doing the job. Otherwise, I'm probably the one most directly affected with it. Yeah, I'll get some income off of it, but I'm the one with the most clear view of it, and I sure don't see anything objectionable about having it there. And I'm tired of not having cell phone service at my house. So believe me, when that tower goes on, and I'm going to U.S. Cellular and trying to get some good cell service. I think that's a 5G tower too, isn't it? Which is supposed to give you extra fast service. So there's a lot to be gained from that tower. That's about all I had. Are there any other questions? Sure.
Can we get that? It'll be a 5G tower for sure?
5G capability.
Capability.
Yes.
It'll be capability, though,
Yes.
not actual service yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay, right.
Okay.
Sorry, if it was going to be 5G, I wanted that in writing. ASAP. Big difference, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the audience?
Thank you. You can go first. So,
Good. Do they have my,
Yes.
what I sent?
Yeah.
Okay.
The one you submitted to me?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, they have that in their packet.
Okay. I am Jennifer Clark. I also live at 4201 East 56th, and that Matt was just talking about. I guess I'll just kind of try to go through this a little bit. I'll try not to read it verbatim, but bear with me. Okay, if the committee allows placement of the cell tower in the residential zone, the proposed tower will be a few hundred. Okay. I've been staying home with my kids for about 3 years. I haven't done public speaking. I used to teach middle school, so sorry. The tower will be about 100 feet south, or a few hundred feet south of our house. It should be denied based on many factors, including the golden factors that Matt went through. Also, the Reno County's 2018 comprehensive plan. That's mainly what I will be going through here. The comprehensive plan states many times that all affected landowners should be considered when looking into zoning the approval of conditional use permits. The conclusion of the plan states the role of Reno County will remain one of seeking opportunities to assure that new developments occur to the benefit of all affected property owners. The proposed cell tower would lower property values of many surrounding landowners, decrease confidence in future rural home buyers, and decrease the desirability and natural beauty of Sandhill State Park, and therefore the requested permit should not be granted. First, the proposed cell tower would lower property values. In the existing land use section of the comprehensive plan, it states, as is typical, much non-agricultural development has occurred along highways in recent years. This land use pattern includes a mixture of residential, industrial, and commercial uses, frequently resulting in harm to property's overall value. In other words, there are examples where implementation of proper land use planning could have benefited the landowners of today by limiting the impacts of decisions that are based solely on the desires of an individual without regard to the effect of neighboring landowners. The proposed cell tower, I believe, will negatively affect surrounding property owners if there hasn't been a study within the county. I have a master's in statistics. I'll go through and look at the data. I'll give you some regression information if you would like that. I had thought about doing that, but I looked through and I found many examples of realtors saying that yes, it affects values. I printed off some of those. I didn't include those in my original report. I can read a few of those off. The Appraisal Journal, or the Realtors Association, says generally the closer a property is to the tower, the greater decrease in price. The effective proximity to tower reduces price by 15% on average. Another study said people generally expect to pay 10 to 20% less for a home located near a cell tower. And even if people don't really care much about a cell tower on their own, they believe that other people will be affected, so they take that into consideration when they're looking into buying a property and offer a lower number on that property. The president of Solstice International Realty to the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors said, as a realtor, I must disclose to potential buyers where there are any cell towers nearby. I've found in my own experience that there is a very real stigma, and cellular facilities near homes are perceived as undesirable. 27 real estate professionals signed a letter to Burbank City Council stating it is our professional opinion cell towers decrease the value of homes in areas tremendously. I have all those signatures here with numbers on them. Not the original signatures, just a copy. There was a New York Times article also stating even houses that have transformers in front of them, people shy away from that. If they have opportunity to buy another home, they do. She said cell towers or cell antennas and towers near homes affect property values. Also in the article, a civil rights lawyer noted if your home is near a cell antenna, the value of your property is going down at least 4%. Depending on the size of the tower and the proximity is going down 10%. So I think that's enough of all that. But I looked at the estimates of the property values, and this is just including the notified circle on this notification we got. And they're only the addresses that I could find. I looked on Zillow. That was the best I could do at the time. You'll see the total property value is about 2.7 million, so a decrease of just 2%, which is the conservative value. That results in a $55,000 loss of property value. If it is at the highest of 20%, that would be more than $500,000 lost. Okay, so continuing, if a conditional use permit is approved, it would set a precedent within the county where other rural residential properties would be kind of available for people to buy and then just build a cell tower on. There are some properties that could probably use improvement, and maybe someone would just buy one of those that's at a lower cost and say, oh, I'm just going to put a cell tower up here. I have a lot of friends that we've talked to about this, and all of them are like, oh, I wouldn't want to buy a house that's near that cell tower. A lot of people that want to buy small acreages out in the country, which is kind of the land that is around here available, but they would prefer not to live around a cell tower. Okay, so I would argue that seems like they don't really need the cell tower here. We have Verizon coverage. We have fine coverage in our house, which is right next door. We also have a hotspot from Boost Mobile, and we get coverage through that. We get our data and our internet through that, and it works just fine. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your name.
Cole.
You were talking about there was one about a mile northwest of here, and it seems like you were saying a 5 to 10 foot difference in the height would make a very big difference in coverage.
It was 35, but it does make a big difference.
You said it was at 170 feet is where you're going to put I don't know what they're called, antennas on this one that's proposed. He said the other one that's northwest is 199 feet, and you could place that at 165 feet. Right?
We ran a study at 199, and the tower owner came back and said we could put them at 165.
Okay. Which is only 5 feet difference from where you're.
We're going at
The height.
165, that's it. But- And that was deemed not viable.
Okay. Just wondering on that. And then, do you have the other picture on here?
The bigger one?
Yeah.
That one?
Yes. Just looking at this, there are some high towers down here, power lines. Seems like that would be a better location for this, where there's already an obstruction there. I don't know everything that goes into it, or if that would be possible or not, but it seems like a better area away from people's houses where it would be more conducive to that. Okay, and then also with relation to the state park, it is going to be visible from the state park. In here I talk about how, let's see, where is it? At Yellowstone, they had to erect some cell towers so that people could have service who are visiting the park. They took into consideration the visual impacts of the cell towers. They made sure that it was away from popular visitor areas so that it wouldn't impact people's visits to the park. I think that's something that should be considered. People might not come and camp as much at the state park if they're going to be faced with a cell tower right there. So, and then also, I have also this, just the coverage map shows that there is coverage where we are. It doesn't seem like they need the coverage there. I know that was not something that is apparently the best thing to go off of, but I just don't understand why this would be a good spot for it. So it's just based on decreasing home values, decreasing the state parks desirability, and then decreasing confidence for future rural home buyers within the county in general. Seem like a good idea is to not let this go through.
I appreciate the tremendous amount of work both you and Matt have put into compiling all this. I have a question about, you both mentioned neighborhood opposition, but yet we have received no communication. I know people maybe wouldn't felt comfortable coming tonight, but we could have received emails or written comments, and we have not received any. So that's kind of hard for us to judge when we don't have any other communication from them.
I understand, yeah. It was obviously withdrawn for the first, so withdrawn at first because of opposition. But,
Right.
and I think this was last communicated in March. Is that correct? That this, so whether or not people knew it was still going on, I don't know. It's fair.
Thank you. Does the applicant want to have any comments?
I'll do my best just to address a couple things here. I want to start on the property value. I spoke with the Reno County appraiser, both for residential and commercial. They said they have no instances in the county of ever decreasing any property value for a cell tower or wireless communications facility. The commercial appraiser actually said that the property value where the tower will be located would increase because there's going to be a fence and that type of structure would actually increase that property value for the appraiser, Reno County appraiser. Let's see, the other thing I would like to address, I know that Matt mentioned the Supreme Court Act of, I believe it was 78, but the Telecommunication Act of 96 covers any health and well-being. That is not a reason for denial of an application, as well as aesthetics or property value. It's all protected under the Telecommunications Act of 96. he mentioned that U.S. Cellular, that he talked to them and they said they do have coverage in the area, as well as referenced the website. What I can speak to that is we have the ability to get RF engineering data directly from U.S. Cellular's engineering team, and they have sent us these maps that have been generated from U.S. Cellular users in this area, and they do have a gap of coverage. U.S. Cellular does have licensing rights, and they do have the ability to cover that area, but right now, due to the growth and the change of the area, they don't have the coverage that they need. You can probably get calls out, things like that, but if you go down a hill or around a curve, depending on the terrain, you're probably going to drop a call from time to time, and that's what they're wanting to eliminate, as well as enhance coverage in other parts of the county. The road, we're going to comply fully with the township. If there's any permitting needing for excess weight or anything like that, or any damage done, we are committed to 100% comply with anything that's requested, either of the county or of the township. I was going to address the property owners. I know we sent out letters 2 different times, notification letters on this application, the original location and for this location. I know there was over 30 sent out. I think it might have been even 40, and there was, for this location, not much negative feedback on that. Again, that's the main things I wanted to address. If there's any other questions for me. I did want to say one thing. The state part was notified. They were originally, that was the first person I called because we've done sites on state parks, Oklahoma, Arkansas. We have 2 active right now, both in Oklahoma and Arkansas. I notified them, talked to the appropriate contact there, and they were not interested in leasing for the tower, but they had no opposition. They were probably the first person that knew of this project just because of that conversation, and they raised no concern, and they were notified as well of this when the property notice was sent out. They were one of the ones that were notified as well. So I don't think that there's any concern on their end from losing revenue or business for this. So if there's any other questions for me.
May I ask a legal question? Sorry.
I don't know if that's allowed. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't care, but
Separate from the board, the 96 Telecommunications Act is health, right? Like if I have a pacemaker, they've said that's not, there's no evidence on that, correct?
correct.
Not on well-being necessarily in terms of land values or.
Property value.
Yeah, not property values, but it is health.
Aesthetics is not a reason for denial under that act.
Interesting.
Staff, do you have any, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, no.
shut you off.
No, if I can answer any other questions. Okay.
I've been doing this for probably 25 years, and I can recall in the early 90s about the 96 Telecommunication Act. What I recall mainly about it was that you cannot consider health as a factor in denying a tower. There was a big push back in the 90s about what they call EMS, or electromagnetic fields, from people and houses that were close to that, and that was causing brain cancer or health problems. And that Telecommunication Act pretty much said that this board cannot consider the health as a way to deny a cell tower from an area. It's in my report, but I would like to just say for the record that we did send letters to 28 different property owners and 2 citizens, 1 property, and they're here in the audience today, Mr. Clark and Mrs. Clark, responded against the tower. Nobody else responded anyway whatsoever with the tower. Did not receive any other phone calls. You recall the other location that we had several citizens in the audience, here at that time prepared to speak on the original location, and that's when the applicant decided to withdraw that application. We did send the notices originally back in March, and as you know, we had to postpone that meeting. We weren't required to send additional notices or anything like that, but it was published in the paper. When we did cancel the meeting, we also sent notices to the media, and so they were aware of the postponement of this meeting here, not once, but twice. So we did do the best we could to get the word out on that. But I'd probably like to touch on right real briefly here was that you heard a lot of discussion and seen a lot of stuff in writing with the golden factors. I discuss the golden factors in every single report that I do here. The golden factors are put in place here from that court case, as you heard, and they're really meant to help you avoid making an arbitrary and capricious or random decision on any type of land use case that would come before you. It's not a means to say that 5 factors are in favor and 3 are against, so therefore it's approved automatically, and vice versa. It doesn't matter to say that 5 factors are against and 3 are in favor, so it's automatically denied. Those factors are put in place because it helps you to consider all of those factors when you're making a recommendation. So that's why I review those every single time, and that's why every single case that you consider, you should be mentioning those factors in your motions as well. You need to be able to consider those instead of coming across as making an arbitrary, capricious, or random decision in any type of land use. And that's what the purpose of that court case was, because there was that case in Overland Park where it appeared by the court ruling that the planning commission and the county commissioners made an arbitrary and random decision. So that's all I have to say, with that. If you have further questions for me.
Board, do you have any questions for staff? If not, I'll call this public hearing for this case closed. Any discussion in the board meeting? Since there isn't any further discussion, I'll call for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to grant waiver from the financial security requirement named the county as found under Article 15-105, 52F, and further move that case number 2020-03, requested by Joseph and Susan K. Hunter Trust, applicant Branch Communications, requesting conditional use permit for Reno County zoning regulations to construct a not to exceed 199-foot tall telecommunication tower on land zone R1, rural residential district, be approved based on the 10 factors, 7 conditions listed in the staff report and serve the public hearing.
Been moved, is there a second? Second. Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, staff call the roll.
Seltzer,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Jorns,
Yes.
French,
Yes.
and Gerson.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I neglected to, realize the hearing is essentially over, but just a point of clarification for everybody. This was originally noticed as a not to exceed 199-foot tall tower, because originally we were doing a 195-foot tall tower, and so the motion reflects that because that's the way it was published, and that's the way it was noticed to the public as a not to exceed 199. However, the site plan and everything else and all the testimony you heard here is for a 178-foot tall tower, so that's what potentially could go into that area, not a 187-foot, not a 195-foot tall. It will have to be that 178-foot. Any change in that, greater than 178, has to have a brand new hearing. So just a point of clarification for that.
So testimony becomes the record.
Yes.
Overrides original.
And the site plan.
And the site plan that was submitted and stuff.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarification. Board, we'll move on to our next item of business. We shared with you a document that basically gives us some guidelines for amending commercial wind energy conversion system regulations. Now, this is something that this is just a set of guidelines that we could use. so if we decide we need to, come in with regulations. On the board, roughly a year ago, will remember that we were very well versed in those. We got reminded of it quite often in a public hearing. But however, we need to set some guidelines on how we present the information and how we digest that information if we decide to move forward. That's what this happens. So, are there any questions?
Does this go to the county commission for approval, or is it just a document?
No, this is just an internal document. The purpose of this, as probably Mr. Gerson said, was, to set a procedure, set an orderly procedure for this board to consider the adoption of new wind energy conversion system regulations. We've had a lot of discussion. We've heard a lot of people talk. I've received a lot of emails. There seems to be a need or request to maybe update our regulations. And so this is my effort to help this board set a standard procedure that we are going to follow to try and update these regulations, rather than having open discussions and not knowing where we're going to go, when are we going to accept public testimony, when are we not going to accept public testimony, all that. So this order of the board is strictly for you guys. It's not something that the county commissioners have to approve of this. They've certainly seen it, I'll tell you that. The media has seen it as well. And so I believe it's out there. I don't believe everybody's out there, so if you want, I can read what we're doing, with that, so that
I think it's useful to have a structure in place so that everybody understands what the process is, rather than, as you said, just kind of open discussion every time we get together.
I mean, that's kind of the first go around. You get an email on that.
Yeah.
Was it an attachment?
There is provisional structure.
Even at this week's county commission meeting, they talked. People would say, when do we get to talk about it, when do we get to talk about it? So making a structure of when everyone gets to give input will be valuable.
And I think the way I have it written, it gives the public an extra opportunity to address this board on their thoughts and their ideas, whether it's yes, amend the regulations, or no, leave the regulations the same. I think this board will want to hear from the public, and this process gives you that ability to do it in an orderly fashion. It will be expected at the June 18th meeting, and we will listen to public testimony, not to exceed like five minutes, and then at the end of that meeting, it would be my expectation that this board would give me a formal direction on what way to go. We're either going to prepare a draft of a new set of regulations, or we're going to leave our regulations the same, and that's strictly your decision. You can either direct me to do it. If you direct me not to do it, then essentially we're done, and we're going to leave our regulations in place, as they are right now. I think, looking at this order, if you agree with the wording on it, I would recommend approval of this, because I think this board owes it to the public to be able to listen to what they have to say and the potential need for new regulations, or the potential for not regulations, out there. And then based off of that testimony, and then I have several documents I've already received, several email communications that I received that I will forward to you, the same random way, the same way I do it for every meeting that we have. You'll get it about a week or so in advance. I'll also send it, electronically, so you can look through that and see what the public is saying to me.
200 letters again.
You could. Hopefully not that much, but you could.
That's a very way we could, smooth that process out, where you could send those out, sooner than in the packet for a meeting.
I can certainly do that, yeah, if you'd like. I mean, I can, instead of sending you 200 emails, 1 week before the meeting,
50 a week.
I can send you 50 a week,
That's a
or,
little more manageable, but
Yep, I can certainly do that, yes, that's fine.
Another question, Mark. I know this resolution was originally intended to be brought up in a March meeting, I believe. If I'm correct.
That's correct.
And, as such, the dating of the response period in there begins back in March and then continues up until June 18th.
Yeah.
Had we acted on that back then, I'm sure that we had a meeting and acted on it, and they were publicized. Do you feel that the public is aware of these timeframes they're dealing with? Because now instead of, 2.5, 3 months, you're looking at 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
They're adopting this, and when we're saying we're going to have comments into this.
This document's been out there, like you said, it was originally scheduled for March. I hadn't received a lot of communique from the public at that time. I'm starting to now, and so I believe the word is getting out there through some medium. If this document is approved, it'll certainly be posted on the website for people to see. And I think right now, several months ago, I don't know, the word wasn't really out. I did receive a few documents, sample ordinances, if you will, out there for us to consider. But I didn't receive a lot of emails. Now I'm starting to see the emails, so I think the word is getting out because it's being talked about at the county commission level. So, I think we'll get a good sampling. And I think people are.
I'm curious about the duty on the board, and I haven't been through the board, the rest of the board has gone through this last year. But I feel that the public definitely needs to have adequate notice to provide comment.
I agree, there needs to be that, and what the reason the March dating is still there is because that's what we stated in our February meetings, that we were gonna start our comment period March 4th, not knowing what our crystal ball was. So we just kept that March 4th dating in there, so it didn't preclude what we had received starting with that date. That's kind of the reason that's there.
Yeah,
I guess, does the rest of the board feel that the June 18th cutoff is still adequate? That ties in with our next meeting, I believe, so that's probably one of the planning we have.
Do we have other cases for June?
we have one BZA case that's coming up. I don't anticipate it lasting more than a half hour, but
It's not quite as complicated as it is.
probably not as complicated. I hope not. I cannot say for sure. I never say never with planning cases, but my anticipation is that it will go probably the same direction as some of the other BZA cases that we've had and stuff. And
Talk about nuts and bolts of that meeting, but is there anything in this document that raises any red flags for this board? Is there any verbiage? I don't know, we could have Mark read it verbatim. I don't know if that's completely necessary, but.
I had one question for clarification on number 6. When you say, on the third line, until such time as proposed amendments have been submitted to the planning commission, and that is by you, correct? By the staff? At the conclusion of the planning commission meeting on June 18th, 2020, the planning commission will not accept additional comment on wind energy conversion system regulations until such time as proposed amendments have been submitted to the planning commission. Those proposed amendments come from.
by me.
I think maybe that should be included in that sentence.
Because what that's saying is that everybody's allowed to submit written testimony, proposed ordinances to the planning commission at that meeting. And at the conclusion of that meeting, we're not accepting any more written documents from the public. At that time, if you authorize me, we will begin a draft set of regulations for your review at some point in the future.
Yeah, and that's the pivotal statement, I'd say, we'll clarify it. After that June 18 public meeting, where we take our input from the folks, that is when we as a board will decide whether we think we need to proceed with amending those regulations, or whether we say, we like what we got, we're done. Now, at that point, if we give an affirmative for staff to begin making amendments, that's when Mark's job load goes like this.
Yep.
And they'll give us, I'm just putting a scenario together, that after if we approve on the 18th, at that point, he will provide us with information to the.
We have a little bit of an elastic clause, a little wiggle room there with item 13, procedure subject to change, and one of the conditions there was the COVID. Well, obviously, since March and April, the COVID has played a large part in the fact that we haven't met, and may have something to do with the public's awareness of its ability to render comments on that.
It also could affect, where we meet, or how we, if we are able to meet on that
I'm saying we
date,
could-
all those things
If we're
will
not,
change.
if we're not convinced that we have adequate input by June the 18th, we can hold for another cycle again, unless that upsets Mark's timing badly. We can say, hey, maybe we just don't think we got enough, maybe we ought to open that for another month, or am I?
Well,
I would think we have to look at all the circumstances. We the last 60 days have put us all through a lot of different circumstances we didn't ever expect. And I think it's opened our eyes to be flexible. And I think if we have some extenuating circumstances, we definitely want to try to keep on this timeline as much as we can. But we also have to understand that at some point we have to. Sometimes we got to push it. We have to move our dates. That's something we'll tackle when that time comes.
I would think that June the 18th is adequate. I wish there was some way, Mark, you had methodology at your disposal to remind people that we're open for business here for the next 3 weeks. Got something in the county website again, or legal notices, or.
well, we'll put this out here, and like I say, I've received a lot of emails right now. I've received sample ordinances. To answer your question, though, if you approve this today, then if you want to amend it, and if you want more time, then you're looking at an amendment of this order and bringing it back before the full board, and then the full board will have to discuss whether they want to agree to amend your amendment to this order here, and then if you want like another month, then the full board will have to agree to
I
that.
think a month till the 18th of June is adequate. But if you have concerns about that, I just put it out on a reminder basis of some sort.
But I think, people that are interested in this issue, have a lot of that information already collected.
And they've been interested for a long time.
And so it's just a matter of pulling it out and getting it in a format that resubmitted, basically.
I'm good with it.
You need a roll call vote, or is it a voice vote? Kind of point
I would do a roll call vote. You want me to read it, or you want to approve it? Good?
Do you want to have, as each of the board members,
Like a motion?
well, amen. I first got to clarify that if we need it read, have we all reviewed it to a point where we understand it enough? Do we need Mark to read it?
Okay.
So, we don't need to read it, Mark. I will entertain a motion to accept it. Accept it tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I will move approval of the planning commission order for the process of consideration of amendments to the wind energy conversion system regulations as presented in this handout, which is dated May 21 of 2020. Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, staff call the roll.
Seltzer?
Yes.
Baker?
Yes.
Shorns?
Yes.
French?
Yes.
And Gertson.
Yes. Staff, is there any other business we need to attend to in this meeting?
I have no other business.
Anything from the board members, any new business? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. May 21 meeting adjourned.
Mr. Commissioner, for hazardous duty pay.
You can get just exactly how much I get.